Good morning and welcome to This Week. What a difference a week makes.
What more do you think I should do?
How about dinner?
Today was a good step.
He seemed very sincere in trying to get engaged in the process.
Will Obama's charm offensive revive the grand bargain and finally break the budget stalemate? Senator Ron Johnson was there and joins our Powerhouse Roundtable with the inside story. Then,
I have supported both a path to legalization or a path to citizenship.
Let's wait for a few minutes and see how Jeb Bush changes his mind again.
a double take from Jeb Bush on immigration. How will it shape a possible presidential race? Governor Bush is here and we'll ask him. Plus,
I will speak as long as it takes.
Rand Paul takes over the Senate. Facebook's Sheryl Sandberg takes heat for leaning in.
My message is not one of blaming women.
And we take on all the week's politics right now.
From ABC News, This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Reporting from ABC News headquarters, George Stephanopoulos.
Hello again. Could this be the week Washington got back on track? That's the question buzzing through the Capitol after the president picked up the phone, picked up the tab, and spent more quality time with rank-and-file Republicans than at any other point in his presidency. The first reviews have been encouraging, and in his Saturday address, President Obama showed some tempered optimism.
Making progress on these issues won't be easy. In the months ahead, there will be more contentious debate and honest disagreement between principled people who want what's best for this country. But I still believe that compromise is possible. I still believe we can come together to do big things. And I know there are leaders on the other side of the aisle who share that belief.
House Speaker John Boehner a bit more skeptical.
I think it's a sign, a hopeful sign, and I'm hopeful that something will come out of it. But if the president continues to insist on tax hikes, I don't think we're going to get very far.
And one of those Republican senators at dinner with the president Wednesday night here on our Powerhouse Roundtable, Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. Good morning. Also the chairwoman of the Democratic National Committee, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Congresswoman of Florida, our own George Will, Paul Krugman of Princeton and the New York Times, and the White House correspondent for Bloomberg, Julianna Goldman. Welcome to all of you. And let me ask you, Senator, what happened there?
Well, it was a very honest, frank, pretty complete discussion of the problems we face in this nation. President Obama opened it up, really prioritizing the problems, certainly making the point that it's health care, it's Medicare. From my standpoint, the input I provided to him is if we're going to really get to an agreement, this is a good first step. I mean, you have to start meeting with people, you start developing relationships. You got to spend a fair amount of time figuring out what we agree on first. So many times we're talking about different numbers, and we have to first agree on the facts, the figures. One interesting point he made is he said, the problem with Medicare is about $1 of every. Basically, Americans pay in $1, but they get more than $3 out in benefits. He said people generally don't understand that. They think that money's theirs. And the point I made to him is, Mr. President, you are in a unique position to be able to make sure the American people understand that. We're not going to be able to solve these very difficult problems unless we start laying the groundwork and prepare the American people for the solutions.
So will this lead to negotiation?
I certainly hope so. I got a call from his chief of staff over the weekend to talk about what we need to do in terms of developing the process. So I'll certainly give the president the benefit of the doubt. The other side's not going to go away. If we're going to solve these problems, it's going to have to be done on a bipartisan basis. And I think most Republicans are more than willing to work with this president.
We heard from House Speaker John Boehner, George Will, revenue is still the big issue.
And Senator Johnson's leader, Mitch McConnell, has said the revenue question is settled. It was settled in the fiscal cliff, so no more revenues. I'm not sure what you compromise about. The charm offensive, one night dining together at the Jefferson Hotel, follows a long period in which the president has said Republicans don't just have bad policies, they're bad people that have bad policies. And it's hard to undo that in a night. Now, he needs 5 senators. That's basically what he needs to do. You need 5 justices to get something done in the Supreme Court. He needs 5 Republicans to come over to get to 60 with the 55 Democrats. I think it's unlikely.
Go ahead.
He needs far more than that. He has to bring the House along as well. So this has got to be a bicameral. This has got to be a robust process. And again, you got to take that first step. And the president did that. I think Republicans reciprocated.
If the president lays out more far-reaching entitlement reforms on Medicare, for example, will Democrats in the House follow him?
Well, I think what needs to happen, the president's going to come up to Capitol Hill this week and meet with both Republican and Democratic caucuses and conferences and continue the dialogue. I mean, unfortunately, what we've had thus far is a paralyzed Republican leadership, particularly in the House, who's not been able to act, not felt at all that they have enough leeway because of the extremism in the Republican conference to do anything with the president. So reaching out to the rank and file is extremely important. Building those relationships and building up some of that trust, because it's really hard to make tough decisions and reach consensus when there is such a trust gap.
You're as skeptical as George?
I'm really skeptical because, I mean, this is not about bad personal relations. People are perfectly capable of being polite to each other, being nice, having a nice dinner. This is about a fundamental difference in visions about what America should be.
It's both.
One party really wants to take down the safety net we have. One party really wants to privatize Medicare, wants to roll back, want to try to privatize Social Security back in 2005. The other party wants somewhat extended and wants Obamacare to go into place, would do more if it could. That's not something you're going to resolve with a few dinners.
But look, both sides understand what a grand bargain is going to look like. Republicans are going to have to give on revenues. Democrats are going to have to give on entitlements. And so there is some case for optimism now that if the president, in trying to build trust, wants these lunches, these dinners, don't become news events that we're covering. But if Republicans see the president moving forward, putting Medicare savings on the table that doesn't just hit providers, but also hits beneficiaries as well, and also going out and selling it to give Republicans some cover, then there could be a sense that you could get some Senate Republicans to help bring the House along as well.
And they'll have to go first, the Senate Republicans.
Yes, let's begin the process right here, right now. Is it conceivable that your caucus, you're from Florida, which is full of old people, known as
Quite a few senior citizens.
known as God's antechamber for a good reason. But anyway,
Now.
is it
I beg to differ.
Is it conceivable that your caucus would consider, with any concessions from the Republicans, raising the age of eligibility for Medicare?
Look, the only way we've made any progress in careening from crisis to crisis in the last several years is because of Democratic votes in the House of Representatives. The Republicans have been able to get absolutely nothing done with their majority. They've needed our members, the majority of our members, to actually sit down, be willing to make political sacrifice, actually spend some political capital. We supported $1.2 trillion in spending cuts, the cuts-only approach to the debt ceiling deal in the summer of 2011. We did that because it was important to not let the country go over and jeopardize the full faith and credit of the United States. We need the Republicans to realize that they are going to have to.
No, but can I just say something here? Because is the condition of any Republican support that you have to go for really terrible policies? Because raising the Medicare age is a terrible policy. It raises medical costs. It does very little to improve the budget. It introduces a lot of hardship. Means testing Medicare is a better policy. I don't particularly like it, but it's a better policy. There are other things you can do. There are other ways you can cut. Even I don't like the business about changing, the price index for Social Security, but that's not as bad. This is the worst of all the things on the table.
Let Senator go and then you
To say the Republicans haven't done anything is just false. The House has actually passed budgets, with proposals to try and save Medicare, bipartisan proposals, quite honestly. The Senate hasn't passed a budget in over 4 years. Listen, unless we do something, these programs are going broke. It drives me nuts. When I hear people say that Social Security is solvent to the year 2035, it's not. In the next 20 years, it'll be $5.1 trillion more in benefits than they're bringing in payroll tax.
Let me put a version of George Will's question to you then. If the president went along with either means testing Medicare beneficiaries, more far-reaching, he's done a little bit already, and also adjusting the consumer price index for Social Security recipients, would you, as a senator, be open to more revenues?
Listen, if you're taking a look at in a entitlement reform package, actually bringing in revenue for those entitlement reforms, I might look at that. But the fact of the matter is, we already have $1 trillion in middle income tax increases hitting us in Obamacare. They're hidden, but it's middle class. It's certainly true, as well as another $600 billion. So you've already got $1.6 trillion worth of tax increases hitting us in the next 10 years. That's going to harm economic growth. And George, the best way of getting out of this situation is economic growth.
No, look. First of all, that is completely untrue. There are not $1 trillion in taxes in Obamacare. And what is true is that the president, in his grand bargain, which is still on the table, which Republicans could take him up on right now, has $360 billion more in savings that ensures that we can add solvency to Medicare. Let's look at what entitlement reform is necessary to reduce the deficit. It isn't Social Security. Social Security solvency has to be dealt with. It can be dealt with separately because there is that many years of solvency left in Social Security. So let's not hit the middle class first. Let's make sure that we take a balanced approach to deficit reduction. And no, the Republican leadership cannot dig in and say that we are done with revenue, because we are not. We got $600 billion. The Speaker himself, in his proposal, in the grand bargain discussion they had with the president, had $1 trillion in revenue. And so there is another about $600 billion left that we could do in revenue.
Just a question. You said let's start with the facts, but we've just run aground right there, right? We cannot agree
exactly
on
my point. It made my point. We have got to agree on the facts.
But your facts are false, so we have a
They
problem.
are not.
So
They are not false.
The Social Security thing. Social Security if it has a dedicated revenue base, it has a trust fund based on that dedicated revenue base. You can't change the rules midstream and say, oh, suddenly the trust fund doesn't count.
Here's the problem with the trust. Here's the problem with the trust fund. The federal government owns U.S. Treasury bonds. It's the same thing. Is if you have $20, you spend it. And by the way, that money's spent, it's gone. You write yourself a note for $20, stick it in your pocket and say, I got 20 bucks.
We've done
No, you don't. You have a note that you have to sell in the open market. The trust fund is a fiction. It doesn't, it has no value to the federal government.
If you want to think of Social Security as not just being part of the government, then there's no such thing as a Social Security problem. It's just part of the general budget. And you cannot say on the one hand, Social Security's trust fund doesn't matter. On the other hand, we're going to restrict it to only operating off payroll taxes. But this is garbage. I mean, it's important to realize that the facts that are being brought out here are in fact non-facts. And how do we go from there?
Facts.
Well, as Pat Moynihan famously said, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. And we're going to start this chimeric negotiation from two sides that can't agree on the most basic thing.
But we are going to have, one second, I said
that's the first thing we have to
We are going to have a lot more
facts.
information on the table this week.
Facts.
Hold on one second. We're going to have a lot more information on the table this week. We're going to have budgets put forward in both the House and the Senate. Democrats in the Senate, Republicans led by Paul Ryan in the House. John Carl has more on that.
This one, which again includes those fundamental changes to Medicare, may actually be more controversial than his last one, because this time Ryan is promising to balance the budget in 10 years. His last budget didn't balance until way out into the 2030s, and he's doing it entirely with spending cuts. In fact, I am told he will leave the spending levels under the sequester in place for the next 10 years. Meanwhile, the Senate is going to do something that they haven't done in 4 years. They're actually going to release a budget. Senate Budget Chairman Patty Murray is not promising to balance the budget, but she is promising to undo the sequester with a mix of tax increases and spending cuts found elsewhere. George?
Julianna, Goldman, nothing from the White House probably until April. No White House budget until April. But Paul Ryan now able to get to balance in 10 years instead of 30, in large part because the economy has been doing better.
Yeah, because he's counting the revenues from the fiscal cliff deal, $600 billion, also savings from the Affordable Care Act as well. But this is an important week for budget talks. The battle lines really are being drawn here, and we are going to see just how far apart both sides are. I think one of the questions for the White House, and this is why they started the charm offensive last week, to start softening the field here, is how they're going to respond to the Ryan budget. They say that they're going to respectfully point out the differences that they have, but the devil will be in the details of how respectful they're going to be. Nobody wants to see a replay of when the president famously gave his budget speech in 2011 and hammered Paul Ryan sitting in the front row there. And so it'll be a test of whether this civility will continue.
So, George, we're going to have everything on the table probably by the end of the week, but my guess is that everyone in both the House and the Senate is still going to be hanging back till the summer to wait and see what really happens when the sequester starts to kick in. And then when we face this next deadline, the government running out of its borrowing authority sometime this summer.
The Republicans like the sequester so far, but so far they like the sequester. And when Senator Murray begins by saying we're going to end the sequester, she's saying we're going to end the one thing Republicans think they've won in the last year in Washington.
Are they going to like it in June?
No, because this is, People talk. The sequester is mostly falling on discretionary spending. Discretionary spending is easy to cut because you just say, let's cut that number until you start to see the consequences. And it will start to build. And it won't just be White House tours. It'll be air traffic delays. It'll be, it'll be a lot of things that people actually value. In some ways, some of my liberal friends are actually also in a way welcoming the sequester because they think that as the effects kick in, it'll remind people why actually we need a government that does its job.
And we'll put more pressure on defense, which could cause some trouble.
And of course, that's the problem. 65% of the budget is off the budget. It's not. It's on automatic pilot. If you ran a business that way and basically said, healthcare, don't worry about what we're spending on that. Spend whatever. Same with retirement. You'd be bankrupt in no time. The fact of the matter is the federal government is bankrupt. The only reason it's not functionally bankrupt is because we can print money, and that's what we're doing.
Can I say something
the overhang.
about the state of the budget? There's a remarkable document that almost nobody noticed came out yesterday from the Congressional Budget Office about the budget. And what it said is it's projecting a deficit of $845 billion this year, of which fully half is what they call automatic stabilizers. Low revenue because of a depressed economy, unemployment benefits, which are high because of a depressed economy. With a fully recovered economy, the budget deficit would be down to about $420 billion, which is, in fact, a level that is consistent with a stable debt position.
It is government out of the way, and we'll have
the cyclically adjusted budget deficit now is back to what it was in 2006, back to what it was during the height of the housing bubble. So we are, in fact, we have already basically brought the budget under control, and nobody noticed.
For the next 10 years.
What CBO has also said is that if we don't replace this, if the sequester remains, we'll lose about 750,000 jobs. Evidence that a cuts-only approach like the sequester, particularly one that is indiscriminate, takes a meat-axe approach instead of a targeted, responsible approach to spending cuts with balance from closing tax loopholes that only benefit the wealthy and using that to reduce the deficit. Make sure that we also talk about entitlement reform, which, yes, I would be willing to support that if we have a balanced approach. And the only ones who, unfortunately, right now are on the side of cuts only is the Tea Party extremists in the Republican Party in the House and the Senate.
Sequestration is a lose-lose for both sides. For Republicans, to the extent that they're seen as uncompromising to a fault, this is just going to hurt the brand even more. For the president, we're seeing robust job growth, great trends in the economy right now, and the sequester shoe has yet to drop. And to the extent that it starts shedding 750,000 jobs a year to push the economy back, that's bad for the president,
will this, and that's one of the questions, though. We saw this robust jobs report this week. Is this going to actually make the sequester less
George,
I don't think the sequester is going to be. I don't think the problem is going to be the fact that it hits the economy, although it will hit the economy, and it's a real shame because it looks like finally the engine is really catching, and just at the moment the engine is catching, somebody is pulling the plug.
Exactly.
To make
At what point do we restrain the growth in government? At what point?
Spending growth has been exceptionally low under Obama. We just need to say that.
We're up 23% of our economy in terms of government.
With your adjective about the robust growth?
Yeah.
If the workforce participation rate were as high today as it was just 12 months ago, the unemployment rate would be 8.3%. If the workforce participation rate were as high today as it was when Mr. Obama was inaugurated, the unemployment rate would be over 10%.
The counter-argument to that would be if all the government jobs weren't cut, the unemployment rate would be lower.
And we are still 3.1 million jobs below the high point in November 2007. 3.1 million jobs. And the fact is, the average growth after 13 quarters post-World War II recession or recovery is over 18%. Under Ronald Reagan, 19%. Under Obama, it's about 7% because of all the regulations.
And because of the detail we were in.
Our friends on the other side of the aisle, unfortunately, like the senator, continue to root for our economy to not be doing as well.
Absolutely
the fact is we've
that
had we've had 37 straight months of job growth in the private sector. 4 of the last 5 months have been 200,000 plus jobs a month. Look, I want to start where we began, which is that there is a trust deficit between the two sides. I am someone...
Big differences that have been displayed here for the last 18 months.
So let's agree on numbers first.
No.
That's the problem. Turns out, not if you won't tell me.
Hold on. Right? We're going to have to take a break. Finish your thought.
There is a trust deficit. And the way, in my experience, in 20 years as a legislator, that you close that trust gap is to sit down and continue to talk. I'm a lot more likely to reach consensus and agree on the facts when I have spent some time getting to know and working with the other side, and we've got to make sure that continues.
The gulf is still wide. We do have to take a quick break.